My name is Joost de Kruijf. I'm going to explain to you some bit about a data-driven policy announcement on cycling. I'm happy to be back at the International Cargo Bike Festival. Last year I also gave a presentation. It was about connection the cargo bike with the intelligent traffic lights. It's interesting because last year it was the first time, and I thought if I am presenting, I hope that the outcome will be positive. I can tell you that last year's presentation was about optimizing the smart intelligent traffic lights in relation to the cargo bikes to have green priority at traffic lights. At the moment, we are setting up in the Brainport area a scheme where we are connecting cargo bikes to the intelligent traffic light. So I hope today's presentation will have the same effect as last year's, that next year I can come back and tell you something really great about cargo bikes and the data-driven cycle policy announcement. If there are any questions, please feel free. Otherwise, I will try to have a 20-minute presentation and afterwards we do the questions. These are your colleagues from the city of Den Bosch. And it's interesting because cargo bikes and cycle policy related issues are not very much connected to each other. So you have the cargo bike ecosystem and you have the policy or the cycling policy ecosystem, and both are working in a parallel vein. And I hope with today's presentation we have enough room for improvement there. So I will quickly go into the detail. I use this picture because the Dutch government, for the international people in the audience, the Dutch government has, it's called STOMP, and it's a Dutch, but I have to explain because it's a punch and it's really difficult. But there are two things in the presentation. It's about walking. There is an order in it. So walking is the most important, then cycling, then public transport, mobility as a service, and in the end the person car. And if you look at the policy now, it's more about person car and then public transport, and eventually we come to the cycling and the walking part. So we have to change it around. And last weeks I gave a presentation for the Dutch Cycling Embassy. And the question is, with cycle policy, how can we make a punch? How can we go to making impact? Because now the big discussions are about public transport investments and highway investments. So more money has to go to cycling. So how are we going to change dialogue with everybody? So what I'm going to tell you today is a new chapter in, I think, data-driven cycle policy announcements, which must have influence on cargo bike policy too. Again, to take you to the basics, there is a national ambition in cycle announcement, and it's we have the Tour de Force program, and there it says that between 2027 and 2017 we have to have a growth of 20% of cycled kilometers, and even to 2040 it has to grow to 40%. That's massive, that's huge growth in cycling, and the way they want to achieve, and they is then the government in the Netherlands, is three pillars. It's strengthening the network, improving the parking facilities, and the third is stimulating cycling. And I think, but that's my translation, that it's mostly for the cargo bikes, it's strengthening the network. So we have to build better, suitable, high quality cycling network to cater for all the cargo bikes too. That's the start. I'm going to go it's in the presentation, so it will be available, but the interesting part is I use some figures, and although the Netherlands are known for their cycling shares, there's still a huge growth possibility. And if you then ask an average government, how well is the share of cycling in your city, region, province, they tend to not know the figures by heart, and that's not a problem. But this is for the region of The Hague. So it says 20% is going by foot, 5.4% is going by e-bike, and 17.8% is going by regular bike. The transport bike or the cargo bike is not mentioned because it's a really small share in the total mode share, but it is there. Interesting part is people then think, okay, this gives enough insights, an extra perspective, and then I always say, if you do not know the numbers from the total average in the Netherlands, it doesn't say much how it's organized in The Hague. And if we then look more closely, this also doesn't say much. So what we did is to make a split between the short range, the mid range, and the long range distances. And then you see, and of course it's in Dutch, but the regular bike on the short distances is 24.1%. In the mid-range distances, it's 8.6, and in the long distances, it's 3.8. The growth, I think, for transport and cargo bikes is more in the short-range, mid-range distances. There are some fabulous bikes here. They're electrically supported. So in this discussion, where it has to go and where does the increase in cargo bike usage is in the short range distances. What I'm now going to explain, because some people think the Dutch know all, it's also just an assumption. This is the bike parking facility at ASML in Eindhoven, and I think Pim de Weert from ASML is giving a presentation later on this afternoon. ASML was encouraging cycling in their company, and they said, okay, we want more cyclists. Everybody within the range of 10 kilometers should come by bike to ASML. And that was, and it's dated because they shifted, and I think Pim can explain what the shift was, but they said, okay, we have this regulation, we think we do good for the cyclists, but there are too little amounts of cyclists in the bike parking facility. Can you please explain why that's the case? So what we did, and these are dated so I can share it with you. These are all the employees of ASML in the Eindhoven region. We are looking at Eindhoven, it's in the south of the Netherlands. But these are approximately 15,000 employees in the region, of which 7,600 people are living within 30 kilometers of cycling of ASML. So then ASML said, okay, but we now know that there are 7,000 people living within a 10-kilometer cycling range of ASML, but our bike parking facilities are not fully loaded. And then we explained this, and I'm not going to go in depth that much, but this graph says, it's based on the average behavior of the Dutch. This graph says if the travel time increases, so that's the x-axis, the y-axis is the cycling probability. The interesting part is, and that's, I'm telling it to you, but I also told this to the national government, regional governments, local governments, they didn't know these graphs. So if I then explain that with, and it's small, but with 30 minutes of cycling, only 13% of all people are willing to take the bike in the Netherlands. The other line is the e-bike usage. And we had a discussion 2 or 3 weeks ago with all important people in the Brainport region, and they were somewhat downsizing the effect of the e-bike. But if you then say the e-bike is 5 minutes faster on a 30 minutes of bike ride, you have 28% of people going by e-bike. So investing in e-bike may be more sensible for people than only investing in cycling stimulation. That's interesting because people didn't know it. And these are averages, so we also have these graphs, but I thought it should be digestible for you because we have also the graphs for each purpose, so working, working, going to school, shopping, and all other kinds of purposes. But on average, the story behind it is the same. What we then did, because this is the graph, ASML expected, it's on 40 minutes of cycling, 4,900 employees to come by bike, and if you then multiply the amount of cyclists by the likelihood of cycling, there are only 1,800 employees coming by bike, as we expected. And then ASML said that's more in line with what we count in the bike parking facilities we have. Question is, how are we going to raise the amount of people using the bike? So what we then said, okay, but it's interesting because ASML does not have a clue where the region of Eindhoven will invest in improving the bike network over the next couple of years. So if we then say by increasing the network or improving the network, maybe we have 5 minutes faster cycle times to ASML, and then the percentage grows from 28 to 36%. So if we then take into account all the improvements the policymakers already have planned in the region, and we combine it with the private data of ASML, we come to new insights. So not only based on these kinds of analysis, but also some other really valuable analysis. ASML shifted their access and mobility program towards stimulation of e-bikes. They have a shared bike scheme, so they are making the shift. So if we combine the national strategy combined with the private data, something interesting comes up, and that's I think the link to the cargo bikes, because this is also an overview we shared with ASML on where all employees have massive detours reaching ASML. So there are a lot of highways, there are water barriers, there are all kinds of things in the network which do not help the cyclists come to ASML. So not only the government can ask ASML, can you help us getting more people on the bike? ASML can now say yes, but we know where all the barriers are, so maybe we have to construct more bridges, tunnels, or other shortcuts in the network to have a massive, really granular cycling infrastructure. Interesting part is, because now I took the angle for the private companies, and we should talk about the chances for the cargo bike. Based on the analysis we did for ASML, we also developed with Tour de Force, Stichting Natuur en Milieu, so that's a company which is really focusing on the environment and nature. And with a tech company called Arcaleo, we developed the accessibility for the whole of the Netherlands. So what we did is build insights on how far can you come by bike from each point in the Netherlands. So train stations, schools, business parks, neighborhoods. And what we did is for the active mobility, walking, cycling and e-cycling. Although we make bike policy, I always pressure to also look at the e-bike specifically. What we then did is combine it with the likelihood people would like to cycle. So how many people within the range will take the e-bike? It's a different story which comes to the table. Because we then know the travel times and the detour factors, and now it's becoming important, what can we reach? And by combining with all kinds of actual data on destinations, you could say which destinations will you reach in a certain amount of time. The downside of the analysis is which destinations you are not able to reach within a certain amount of time. And it's about accessibility of daily amenities, accessibility of small towns and the urban-rural area discussion. To date, and it's strange, but we didn't have the insights in the Netherlands on the accessibility, the approximity of people going by bike and what can you reach. And and making or developing policy also ask for the delta. So what is going to change? And because the plans were dated from 2017, we also built, and I think there is a typo there, but we built a situation 2017, that was the basics year, and we built a situation 2040. And with the 2040, you can see all the changes from the cycle highway developments in the Netherlands. And it's a bit of a disappointing picture because most of the Netherlands is grey, and grey is stating nothing much happens there in the gain of accessibility on a national level. So there are regions in the Netherlands where not much is being invested in cycle highway developments, but in the south and in the Randstad there will be massive developments. And I want to use one anecdote because the region of Gelderland, it's situated in the east of the Netherlands, they were upset because they were not in the picture, and they said, but we have already invested massively. And then I said, yes, but this picture is the difference between the current situation and the 2040, and you invested between 2017 and 2025. So your gain is already in the program. I presented this for the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, and they said, yeah, but this is great because we now know what the gain in accessibility is for each neighborhood in the Netherlands. So now we know the reachability, and because we combined it with the data of ASML, we know exactly where the gains are between all the employers. Of course, and this is about the audience, you are all here for the International Cargo Bike Festival, so I assume that you're all into cargo bike enhancement so that the cargo bike can find its way to the city. I think, and that's the last slide from content, and I understand that it's quite a bit with all graphs and charts. This is quite similar to the ASML case, but now we used a business park. So this is a business park near Utrecht, and what you now see is the possibility of investing in cycling network related to all the employees which are working in a certain business district. Because we have the data from the employees, we can make these graphs. And if we then look to this one, which I showed you already previously, the thing I would like to have, and I'm not sure who to address the question to, but I would like to ask the audience if it's possible to share the cargo bike data, and it can be in an anonymized way, but if we can put the cargo bike destinations in, like from the couriers or whatever vehicle in, we can make the same maps. And for the general cycle policy developer in the Netherlands, they do not know the whereabouts about the cargo bike. So if we can use the whereabouts of the cargo bike, we can also pinpoint for your group where the missing links are in the network, where maybe a lot of youngsters on bikes are cycling, which hinder the cargo bikes moving through the city. So I would like to maybe challenge the audience to think along in how can we get, and it's maybe only a small sample, get the data ready so that we can move towards improving the situation too, in strengthening the network for the cargo bike ecosystem. I told Henk that I would keep the presentation short. I hope it was a bit comprehensive and easy to digest. But if somebody in the audience have questions about the presentation or already has some data available, I would say the data availability we do after the presentation, but now we focus on the questions about the presentation.
So if you want to respond to Joost's call for data, I suggest you do that after the presentation and approach Joost somewhere here. Any questions to Joost? There was a lot of information there. So I'm sure there's one or two things that could be clarified. I think they are in a bit of an after-lunch Dip.
Yeah.
But then maybe I should start. You showed the example from ASML, and of course we'll have Pim here later today. But do cargo bikes play a role in that kind of mobility, in commuting? Like people taking kids to the kindergarten and then going on the cargo bike to work? Any data on that?
No, not so much. But I think it's not so much related to the because then you have the bakfiets, and I understood from your colleagues that the cargo bike is not necessarily a bakfiets. So the cargo bike is something which you also transport goods with. But it's more about understanding where the system fails, because we have great infrastructure in the Netherlands for cycling. But if you then look in detail, there are a lot of missing links. Really, safety is an issue, so there are quite some unsafe situations. And then the size of the cargo bike, in combination with all the other bicycle family vehicles, is sometimes challenging. And it's good to have understanding where they mix and where they are challenged because the infrastructure lacks.
Well, there I would of course make the point that all these exhibitors here are trying to get goods delivery moved from vans to cargo bikes, right?
Yeah.
That means we will remove vans from our streets. That means that there will be more space for the remaining cars. So you can only do this if you also redistribute road space and the layout of the infrastructure, because you are removing goods transport from the roadway, moving it to the cycle path. Mm-hmm. That's not sustainable in the long run, because the cycle path wasn't built for that. So you must adapt your infrastructure. Only question, of course, it's in a couple of weeks, Amazon or UPS can shift from vans to cargo bikes. But before the infrastructure has been adapted, it's a much longer process.
True, but there is also a misunderstanding that you have all vehicles being transferred to a cargo bike, because then you need, I think, 34 cargo bikes to unload one truck. But it's more the continuous inflow of small packages into the city, which are really hindrance for the inhabitants of the city and the people visiting the city. So it's also a shift of calling for a lorry, which brings also small parcels, because I think there are great vehicles to do that too. So it's not only a shift from vans, because I think we necessarily have vans in the city, but it's smarter planning which will be maybe more successful. And then the cargo bike shouldn't wait for some polar or traffic light, but they should have free flow into the city. And I think there is the big gain for the cargo bike. Yeah.
Still no questions? There is a question.
Fantastic granularity of data. I could only wish for something similar back home. What was the greatest surprise for you that emerged from the data, something you weren't anticipating?
The interesting part is that and I skipped it really quickly because of the time. There are also cycling stimulation apps in the Netherlands. And with that, a lot of GPS data is recorded. So at once, the team translated the GPS data into valuable insights on how the cyclists move along in the city. And we had the first discussion, and we showed it on the big screen. And there was a city, not to name maybe today, but there was a Dutch city, and they are really investing in cycling. And we showed the map, and then they said, your data is wrong. That's not the way people cycle in our city. And then we were shocked and then thought, okay, no, but it's not our data. We used your data, we translated it into insight, and then so people cycle the way they cycle. And then it was surprisingly for us that half of the people in the city didn't even know how the cyclists used the infrastructure. And then the discussion came, why should the people on the bike use the path which you show instead of what we think they do? And then they said, yes, but if you take the parallel route, you avoid all traffic lights in the city. So there are cobblestones, but I don't mind using the cobblestones. I have free flow, and I can cycle in a free flow instead of waiting each time for a traffic light. And then the difference between the planned cycle network and the actual used cycle network, I think that was the biggest gain. And I for sure know, because the guys from Den Bosch, and I often cycle, and then I see they take different routes because they know the network the best. So they use the network every day. So if we plot the cargo bike users on a network, I think there will be new routes which nobody knows but will be really effective using in the city. I think that's the line where we have to go. Yeah. And may I ask where you're from?
I'll translate.
Oxford. I think in Oxford you can do similar things. It's so it's not that difficult as I maybe presented. But yeah, hopefully it helps there too.
Thank you very much.
There's one more question.
One last question. Where? Oh, wait for the mic, please.
Hello, I was curious how much the storage facility was a parameter in going by bike or not.
Not. We didn't take it. I understand your question. How much was the parking facility? I think there's
the wideness of the spots to put the racks.
No, I think they have a really high quality cycle parking facility. So it's not so much dependent on the quality of the bike parking facility, but more on the usage of the people taking their bikes. Yes.
Because last time I was cycling next to Academie 10. It's a high school in Utrecht, Leidsrijn. And I was surprised because a lot of children were parking their bicycles outside. And I asked a few, doesn't have the school a storage inside, but they do, a big one. It was for half empty, but because the entrance was on the back side and the youngsters were in a hurry, they all put their bicycles outside. True. And locked them outside and speed up to get in. But that's not a thing which is I don't know the English word, which is the case at ASML probably.
No, you would be surprised, I think, but it's more about convenience, and I think students and youngsters are more in the convenience. So, but I think it's important too. So, for showing this and also already being able to present the breakthroughs and the insights we have, we kept things simple, because otherwise you have really sophisticated models which nobody understands, and this is quite straightforward. You have people and you have a willingness, and if you then multiply, then this is this. So it's not the end of conversation, because this only triggers to get a better understanding and a better dialogue between the private companies and the governmental parties in the regions. No.
Once more, thank you very much, Joost. Let's give Joost a round of applause. Thank you.
You're welcome.